Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Beneath the Transaction podcast. I'm Chris Pineda, your host. I'm stoked for today's episode and to get into things with our guest. So I'm going to introduce him quickly and kind of share what we're going to dive into today. And I'll allow him to obviously introduce himself in more detail, but we're going to dive right into it. And this is an exciting episode. A lot of my guests are leaders in culture change or founders of organizations. I've talked to foundation and philanthropists. This one's unique because I'm speaking with a traditional tattoo practitioner, and the world of tattooing, especially indigenous tattooing, I've become a big, not just fan of, but developed a really sort of honoring and I treat it as almost sacred in the last several years of my life since getting mine. And so our guest today is Francis, or Kiko, and he is based in California. And if I'm not mistaken, is it you or your wife or both that's from kind of, your family's come from Pangasinan? Is that both, or was it just your wife?
On my side, that's my side a bit further back in the generation, but I do have family that are also from Pangasinan as well.
Awesome. Okay. So for those of you that don't know, for those Filipinos that are listening, buhay, thank you for being with us. For those of you who don't know, Pangasinan is in the main island, Luzon, northern on the west side, and it's a coastal province. And my father, my dad, he's from Pampanga, which is just a couple hours south from there. So not too far. And I went to Pangasinan in my last visit to the Philippines, and it was beautiful. Well, thanks for joining, Francis. Kiko, I appreciate it. Filipinos are big on nicknames, so I'm going to call you Kiko. We also discussed, too, you're just a couple years older than me, so in the culture, we have titles for people older than us. Older sisters, ate, older brothers, kuya, so you're also kuya to me, so thank you.
I love that. Yes, thank you. I'm honored to be your kuya, brother. I'm kuya to a lot of people. So
I'll turn it to you to just share a little bit more about yourself, and then we'll jump right into our topic today. And I'll frame that topic as well. But we'll say, by day, your full-time job, you are a nurse in post-acute care, and you work on wounds. So you work with
yeah,
with skin, which I think is ironic because you're also a traditional tattoo practitioner, and you also are working with skin there. And you also do it traditionally by putting simply tap or batok or tatek, which is incredible to revive that lost art, especially in the Philippines. So go ahead and tell us a little bit more about yourself, and then I'm going to tie in why I have a traditional tattoo practitioner on our show and the connection it actually has to my book, and why it doesn't matter if you have tattoos or not, if you're from our culture or not, that this episode it's gonna go deep and you're gonna glean a lot from it, because there's so much meaning in indigenous tattooing that I want to get into. But tell us more about yourself, Kiko.
well, first, thank you for having me here, Chris. I'm really honored to be a part of your podcast, and really thankful to be here for the community as well. So, my name is Francis, also known as Kiko. Common misconception: my last name is actually San Diego, just exactly like the city, spelled exactly like the city. A lot of people think that I'm located in San Diego, but I'm actually located in the Inland Empire here in Southern California. It's about an hour and a half away or so from San Diego and LA. So, but yeah, my name is Francis, also known as Kiko. Just like Chris said, by profession, I am a nurse. I've been a nurse for about 13 years now. This year will be 13 years. Specifically, I am currently focused on the skin. So I do work predominantly with wound care, with skin treatments. And of course, on the other side, when I'm not working as a nurse, my wife and I were both tattooers, traditional tattoo practitioners. My wife uses a machine. I use traditional tapping methods. And we have a studio out here in Riverside, California, called Tribal Korner Studio. And so I'm just so thankful to be one of several people that do this work traditionally. And it's, for me, one of the biggest reasons why I started doing this work years ago, was because being someone out here in California, displaced from our ancestral islands, right? One of the things that I really wanted to bring to our community, especially here locally in the Inland Empire area, was a bit of that traditional practice that a lot of people have been seeing recently, most especially in the past couple of years over social media, online. in regards to our traditional tattooing practice. And so, as someone who has worked with patients and I know the body very well, obviously, anatomy, physiology, I'm very accustomed to that. On top of me being an artist, I've been an artist my whole life. For as long as I've been able to pick up a pen and a pencil, I've always been able to draw and really have been so immersed in the world of art. I wanted to somehow in my life combine both of my loves for art as well as for my culture. And when I did my research and I was able to research about the different tattooing practices from all over the world, because I've always been very fascinated with body art, specifically tattooing. When I found out that the Philippines has our own traditional tattooing practice, that just blew my mind. It changed my world completely, especially since I have been a big admirer and a big advocate as well for traditional tattooing, especially in the Pacific Islands, Polynesia. I really have been fascinated with their tattooing culture, with Hawaii, with Samoa, several other Pacific Island cultures, and I really wanted to learn more about it. And that's when I discovered that we had our own tattooing tradition. And so that's when, like I said, my world completely changed. And I've been so grateful for this journey because it has changed my life as much as it has changed the lives of the other people, many, many people that I've tattooed over the years. And for me, I'm just so honored to be a part of their journey because,
Yeah.
for me, I always say as well that as someone living here, especially, and not just in California, but anywhere in the United States or anywhere outside of the Philippines, really, there comes a point in our lives where we long for the connection to our culture, right? We long for it, especially for someone, whether you are a full Filipino from both sides of your family or whether you are mixed with, some another ethnic background or wherever you are in the world. Most of us, if not all of us, have always felt that longing for reconnection, especially if maybe many of our fellow Filipinos were not really connected to the culture and then suddenly something sparks their journey. And so that was one of my biggest drivers to do this work was to bring this to our community as well as me learning more about it along the way. At the same time, being an advocate for this work. I think over the years, a lot of people have had this idea that it is a dying art, right? While in fact it is very much alive, it's just hasn't really been brought to the light as much, up until the past maybe decade, even so.
There's a lot wrapped in here. So I just want to give some context too to people that might not know and then get your thoughts on these things as well, because there's a lot that you've covered just in your history and your discovery. Just some basic sort of facts or info out there. I love that you said when I found out that our ancestors were also they marked their bodies, they tattooed. I didn't know that either growing up. And I kind of categorize Filipino culture in two ways. There's modern Filipino culture, and then there's sort of pre-colonial indigenous culture. And I just had an episode with a really a Filipino history expert, pre-colonial expert, and we have an interesting ancestry because we've been conquered, we've been at war, and we've lost a lot. But our ancestors come from, and again, this is just people putting labels on things. And you mentioned the Polynesian Islands. We have the same ancestors, Austronesia. We come from the same place, same. Our linguistic roots are the same. Practices, food, culture, tattooing all has similar roots, pre-colonial Philippines. So there's connections across the board there, and we have common ancestors. And tattooing for me, like growing up, when I desired to get a tattoo, like as an adult, and I started to learn, Filipinos, they tattooed. In fact, you obviously know this history, but the early Spaniards called them Los Pintados, which is the painted ones, because they were painted, they had tattoos. They thought it was paint, but they had tattoos from head to toe. And some of them were even, brought kind of as slaves to different Spanish colonies to be like human art because, Spain they were fascinated by the tattooing that was there.
Right.
So that's just some basic sort of history there. So it's not outside of our culture. And, my dad and family, they, when they think of tattooing, they think, oh, criminals have tattoos. They don't see the indigenous side of it. I've had lots of conversations with my dad now, and we've spoken to indigenous experts, and he actually came to my first session. And I think he's developed more of an appreciation for it, although he doesn't doesn't have a
Mhm.
tattoo and he'll never get one. But you talk about this sort of cultural revival, and it's important that this happens because so much of our ancestry was lost in colonization and over time. And as Filipinos didn't keep record written, it was
Mhm.
all oral, it was through tattooing, it was through story, things of that nature. So there's so much there, and we're gonna get into why remembering our past and our ancestors is so important. And I talk about this term pamana in our book a lot, which is basically our lineage and the legacy that we are a part of from those that came before us. And I think it's so important to help us identify our purpose. But tell us a little bit more about your sort of tattooing pamana, like your lineage that you come from tattooing. Where did you learn?
Mhm.
You mentioned that you also learned from some of the Samoan, the Suluape family that I can trace tattooing back generations. Taught you how to make some. If I'm remembering correctly, you can correct me if I'm wrong. That the tools. Talk us through what the
Yeah,
tools are like, what tapping method is compared to modern for people that don't know, just so that they can maybe develop an appreciation for what we're talking about before we dive into actually the meaning and the symbolism,
absolutely.
the significance behind marking, our
Yeah,
bodies.
for sure. So when I started this journey, like I had mentioned earlier, it really blew my mind when I found out about our traditional markings and that we had a tradition of marking our skin with these symbols that, like you had said, represent, our ancestors. And just like our colonizers wanted, they wanted a lot of erasure within the language, the stories, the traditions. And so one of the ways for us to preserve this was through marking them permanently on the skin, right? And so when I did my research on it, and it took me a while to really make that decision to take the leap and to do this work, knowing that it's not going to be a smooth road. You know what I mean? It's getting into a world that is very spiritual. You have to be a spiritual person truly in order to do this work. I mean, I could not imagine not having a sense of spirituality and doing this work. And so, knowing that I grew up as a very spiritual person, very connected to my cultural ancestors and just connected to that world, I knew that this was something that was a calling for me. And so, when I first started, it was definitely something that took a lot of thought and a lot of meditation and prayer and just guide me through this journey. I know it's gonna be a very blessed one for sure, but I know it's gonna be rough. It's not gonna be always sunny days for sure. So I in this world I discovered that there is not a lot that is willing to be shared, right? As well as there's not a lot that is willing to take people under their wing necessarily as an apprentice or even just as someone to guide, not saying that there is not, but you do come to discover that these practices, understandably so and rightfully so, are not just going to be easily shared with just anybody showing interest. You really have to kind of earn your way into being able to even pick up tools, learn how to make tools, and even mark the skin. So, when I first started, I really kind of started off doing it on my own, truthfully. I was just someone who had so much passion and drive to do this work, knowing that, especially after my mom passed away in 2021, and she passed away really young too. It really made me think that and realize that life is so short. If we're not going to pursue what is supposed to be called for us, then I feel like we're doing a disservice to our ancestors who literally died and struggled for us to be here today, right? So that's when I said, okay, I'm going to take this leap. I'm going to do this for our community. I'm going to do this for our ancestors. And so I started off doing this on my own, doing a lot of the research, getting a lot of books that I could really dive into and read and research as much as I can, connecting with the right people, even the authors of these books, the experts behind traditional tattooing, even in Western tattooing. I have a lot of friends who are also Western tattoo practitioners, I guess we can call them. And I really just dove in completely, just getting as much as I can. And then when I felt ready enough to go ahead and start practicing, especially on the skin, I wasn't really one to practice much on practice skin, or some people would practice on fruits, some people would practice on even pig skin. I tattooed directly on my own skin, truthfully. And when I felt ready enough, especially with my background in nursing, like I said, I know the body well, I know anatomy, physiology very well. I felt a lot more confident in knowing my limitations and what I could do. And so I started off on doing this on my own. And then over time, especially with the people that did trust me to give them the markings that, like I said, I was definitely more accustomed to, because I did all the years of the research and I did a lot of reaching out to people. I had more people that were willing to get marked by me. And then over time, like I said, more people started to notice my work. More people started to notice, hey, there's someone that's doing this work. He's doing it the traditional way. He is learning as well along the way. And then I started to get in contact with others, and they started getting in contact with me as well, that decided, hey, let me show you a couple of things. Let me teach you a couple of things. Let me help you tweak this up. Let me help you improve on this. And so obviously being open-minded to that, I said, yeah, I'd love that. I love the mentorship. I love the friendship, whether it's not just in tattooing, but mixing in the world of our Filipino mythology, our folklore, our herbalism, our spirituality. All of that is essential as well in this work. You cannot just do the tattooing without knowing our folklore, without knowing our mythology, without knowing our weaving patterns, our pottery. It's very holistic in many aspects. And so one of the people that reached out to me was a member of the Samoan Suluape family, the traditional tattooing family that has been going on in Samoa for generations and generations. And one of them reached out to me, and because he noticed I made a tool, and he said, "Okay, let me teach you how to do it better. Let me teach you how we do it here in Samoa, and let me basically just show you how to make the tools, right?" Which for me was a huge honor, because you don't really get that kind of privilege to be reached out to by a Suluape, and not just a Suluape, a Suluape, which is a really high rank within the Samoan tattooing world. And so when he reached out to me, I took the opportunity right away. I went to his tattoo space, and we spent a day there just really talking, and he allowed me to watch him make the tools. He showed me, this is how I make the tools, this is how I put them all together. And then he let me make the tools, and then he would critique me and telling me, okay, do this one better, do this like this is how I do it. And yeah, I was just able to make the tools with him. And I spent that night as well, when me and my wife, we were there together. He allowed us to sit in on a tatau session, and allowed us to be stretchers for him for the skin, which, I mean, I gotta say, after about an hour, I was about, okay, my body couldn't do it anymore. I'm not one to sit on the floor for that
Yeah,
long.
yeah,
I mean, I'm just built like, I cannot, I'm not a floor sitter, brother. I can't. It was very, people don't realize how hard it is to stretch the skin
sure.
on the floor, you know, sitting, crisscross applesauce, and you're just like stretching the skin. I mean, if you're not used to it, man, it's gonna be a tough on your body.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
did that, and then when my body gave out, and I said I can't do it anymore, my wife took over, and she did way better, obviously. But yeah, I was really honored, and he said, yes, you can use these methods to bring to your practice. And he even said, a lot of people as well within the either Samoan community or the Sulu Ape community would probably say, why are you showing these tool making skills? To why are you sharing them? He said, I'm not a gatekeeper, and I do believe that if somebody is really doing the work with the right intention, then why not share, or why not help him or her improve on their skills? And so I was just very, very much honored to have learned from him, and the skills that he taught me, I used to this day. He gifted me tools as well that he made himself, and as well as taught me how to make mine when the time comes for me to make more. So I use those skills to this day in our studio, and I'm very thankful for him to show me that and to spend time with me. Over time, like I said, more people have reached out to me, and have taken me under their wing in many aspects, and I could not be who I am today in this tattooing practice if it wasn't for them.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story, and I want to point out some things for people listening, and nothing against obviously Western tattooing at all, right? But there's a level of sacredness and intentionality in indigenous practitioners because it is that. There's depth. It's thousands of years old to our culture and our ancestors, and there's so much meaning behind it. To be one that marks another, actually, as you know well better than I, indigenously was a sacred responsibility that you couldn't just do it. It was a calling almost in your amongst your people in your tribe, whatever you want to call it, and it was almost it was a spiritual calling, right? And to have that responsibility was significant. We'll even say of high ranking in a tribe or amongst the people. And I talk a little bit about that in the book. And one of the terms for a indigenous, tattoo practitioner, we'll say, was mambatok, right? Like it's
Mhm.
being able to be the one that puts those markings on other people was a significant and sacred responsibility. And I want to use that and the reverence that you use talking about it to kind of segue into what does this have to do with living beneath a transaction
Mhm.
and living with purpose. So I want to do two things. I want to share sort of my story behind getting my marking, right? This tattoo, and why it's so important in why I use tattooing, I guess, as a metaphor to help people understand purpose. Okay. And so I'm going to share that, and I'd love your thoughts.
Of
And
course.
and some of it's going to connect to the book and the chapter where I actually talk about it, where I'd love some of your thoughts. But like I didn't fully understand the history of Filipino tattooing and markings till I was well into my adulthood. And I always felt a connection to island culture, right? And it took me again a while to learn that, well, we have common ancestry, right? And across the board, it impacts, like I said, linguistics, art, everything. Well, I probably read some of the same things that you did. I was doing my research. I came across a lot of Lane Wilkins' work and started to understand this is actually a big part of my culture, right? And I'm unique in the fact that, and I was just talking about this on another episode, I'm half and half, right? My dad's from the Philippines. My mom is multiple Anglo countries of our ancestry. So I actually, my ancestry is a bit split in the colonizers and
Yeah.
the ones that were colonized, right?
Right.
And that's actually important to me because I feel like I have a responsibility to my ancestors on both sides to bridge the gap, right? And bring people together, beyond this life, we'll say. I really feel a responsibility to do that, where I'm in a unique position to have two different lines of ancestry and lineage and actually, bring people together. So I actually treat that as a sacred responsibility that I have. Back to the tattoo. So, I naturally started, and if people have been listening to my show or have read any of my things, they know that I've integrate indigenous wisdom into my leadership training and development and coaching. So I was already doing that. And I had this experience one day, always wanted to get a piece, didn't know why, didn't know, what I wanted it to, where I wanted it to be, and I didn't know anything about it. I had no knowledge at all. But I started reading some of Lane Wilkins' work. I started doing some of my own research, and I had this incredible experience. And I'll summarize it because it's actually pretty personal and even sacred to me. But
Absolutely.
I was preparing to actually go give a speech to a group of people in the community, and I was planning on talking about an indigenous gesture that I first learned from the Maoris called hongi.
Mhm.
Come to find out, similar like moment of awakening where I was so taken back that, hold on, this gesture of hongi, which is the share the breath of life, pressing your forehead, your nose to another, taking a deep intentional breath. I came to learn, and it was actually through something that Lane Wilkin wrote, that in indigenous Philippines, we had the same gesture, went by a different name called
Mhm.
ongo,
Mhm.
but the same exact thing.
Yeah.
And the reason why that was so shocking to me is because I was this gesture meant so much to me. I almost felt like it was my own, but I also felt like I was taking this from somebody else's culture. But then I had this moment where I'm like, oh no, no, I'm not. This is actually a big part of my pamana, my lineage, where I come from, which is why I felt so drawn to it in the first place. So it was this moment of just kind of shock that I can't believe this. So I'm preparing for this speech and I was going to use that like I often do as a gesture of, I'm not going to force you guys to do this, but I want us to greet each other and work with each other in a way as if we did share the breath of life.
Yeah.
So much different than a handshake. It's so much different than a hug.
Yes.
Let's meet with one another in this space as leaders in our community by sharing the breath of life, metaphorically, right? So I was planning on doing that. And as I was doing that, I just sat back in my chair for a second and I closed my eyes and I imagined, and this was actually the day that I was reading an article from Lane Wilkin where I discovered that, hold on, Ongo, right? That's the same thing as Hongi. And it was this moment of, I can't believe this. I can't believe I never knew this. And I closed my eyes and I just imagined sharing the breath of life with my ancestors. And a context you have to understand, I don't know a lot of my ancestry on my dad's side. We can only go back a few generations.
Right.
We certainly don't have pre-colonial, family history done, right? Where on my mom's side, they can trace back forever, right? And so I have this contrast of, we know so much about my ancestry on my mom's side, but on my dad's, very little. And so I know that I have ancestors, but they're nameless to me. They're faceless. I don't know anything about them. So I just imagined what it would be like to share the breath of life with them.
Wow.
And in that moment, I was really sort of overcome with the thought and the literal nature of my ancestors. And I kind of, I guess you could say I felt their presence and that they're real and that these people were so real, right?
Yes.
And how sad it is that we don't know their names, and how sad it is that our indigenous ancestors have been forgotten, not just by name, but by culture and custom and all of these things. And it actually broke my heart a little bit
Yeah.
to realize that the unfairness on my mother's side to know people generations back, their name, their stories about them, all these things, but that on my father's side, that they're nameless. And it broke my heart. And I actually, in that moment, I felt as though there's a lot of sort of details I'll leave out, but I really felt as though that I was going to, one, get a tattoo, right? I was going to get marked, but it was going to be with a purpose that was so much deeper than just, oh, I want to get a tattoo because it's cool or it will look cool or whatever. It was literally, I want to remember this moment and I want to remember them. I want to remember my ancestors. And so that was the key motivator. And I did a bunch of research on who do I go to. Turns out there was a, practitioner in Portland. He uses modern technology to do it, but he was actually a stretcher for the Sulape family for about, I think, 2 to 3 years. He's traditionally trained. He knows all of the indigenous motifs. He's right there. And I was living in Oregon at the time, 30 minutes up the highway. So I met with him a couple of times and it was unlike any experience, I've ever had. And as I've spoken with other people that have many tattoos, right? None of them indigenous, they just like tattooing, so much different than their experiences, right? It's
Yes.
probably similar to what you do, but we talk story and we talk about our family and what's important to us and the motivation behind it. So much intentionality in multiple conversations before I even get anything on me. And then there's no stencils. It's put on you in the moment and he chooses so much of it. I'm not like telling him I want it to be this or that. I tell him my story and I tell him the purpose behind it and then he marks me. And it was an incredible experience start to finish. So that means the world to me. So everything that people see on here
Mhm.
has meaning, and I love talking about it with people of what it means to me and how it honors my ancestors and it honors what I want to become and how I want to represent my culture and myself and my family. But the way that I've tied this into the book and to the work that I do, I talk a lot about purpose. Purpose is the first condition
Awesome.
of transformation. And I'm going to kind of wrap this up and then I want to turn it back to you to get your insight and your thoughts on this. But when I work with people and organizations, purpose is everything. Purpose is key to transformation. It's key to leadership. It's key to building a team
For
and moving
sure.
people in the same direction. And too often we lack purpose, especially in our leadership, in our life, in our organizations. We're not intentional enough to talk
Yes.
about it. Now, organizations, they'll create like a vision statement, but then it just is this statement that sits on the wall and they forget about it. And then as people, not many people write down a purpose for themselves and let alone distill it into a simple word or even a symbol. And so I found a lot of utility in talking about indigenous tattooing and how one little symbol can mean something so deep,
Yes.
right?
Sure.
And And I talk about that briefly, and I mention a couple of, the markings on me, the centipede, the taumaru, right?
Yes.
And how it has really two meanings. One is the centipede, they protected the crops of our ancestors. So to have the centipede on your body meant that you're going to take care of your people, you're going to protect them, you're going to take care of your culture and your kin, right? But also it was a way they sort of tracked where they came from, right? We're all of one body,
Yes.
and we're just one leg in that body, right?
Yes.
And so this deeper meaning that it has, to that it's not just, oh, this looks cool. This actually means a great deal to me, right? And when people hear that, especially when they're outside of the culture, they start to think about, what's that important to me? What would I actually be willing to mark myself with? And I invite them, when I work with people, to mark it on their heart. But for the day, I actually give them Sharpies and I say, that word or that symbol that you distilled your purpose down to, I want you to mark it on your body today. And we take photos and whatnot for them. And it's kind of a fun exercise, but they remember it, right? And they remember it because there's something visceral about putting it on your body and drawing something out or writing something out that means something deep to you, that helps you remember it. And that's where I think there's indigenous wisdom to learn from. Is it wasn't just, we're gonna put tattoos or, markings on us because it looks cool. There was a sense of, it was part of what was, beauty in it, and there was a part of it
Mhm.
to that, but there was so much more to it. And if we can think of our purpose in our life that way, like, what's so important to us that I would mark my heart with it, right? Now, I'm not telling people to go out and get tattoos, right? I'm just saying, what would be important enough to you that you would mark yourself with it, to help you remember who you are, where you came from, and what you're meant to do in this world, and who are you meant to help. That's what I want people to gravitate to and grasp onto. And I've just found that he- helping them understand indigenous tattooing and the history and the significance behind it flips a switch for people, that they take a little more seriously. They
Yeah.
treat purpose now not just as, yeah, this is my purpose and it's kind of a silly statement. They treat it as something, like you said earlier, it's sacred
Yes.
and it has depth to it. So that's kind of obviously my story of getting a abbreviated version of my marking, and kind of how I integrate it into my work. But I would love you to sort of kind of build on top of that and share some of your insights and your thoughts as you heard me go through all of that.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. And I'm really glad that you had that moment in your life where you said, I really feel like it's the time for me now to receive these markings. And like you had said, to add on to that, everything that I do in my practice, as well as many other practitioners as well who do it in their practice, whether you do it with the traditional tools or you do it with machine, whichever journey you decide to take, is that receiving these markings, like I had said, like you said, is something that shouldn't just be taken lightly. This is something that it is you are making that flip the switch in your head to say, okay, now, I've lived my life to this point, and whether I've had the intention of getting these markings or not, but there's something in my brain that switched and said, now it's the time for me to receive these markings. And my intention is everything. And that is what I advocate big time with this work. Intention is everything. If you're going in with the intention of, well, let me just choose a symbol, let me just choose something that looks nice, something that looks pretty cool to me, and I have it on my skin, but it has really you don't have the intention of, okay, what am I doing to my skin, to my life for me to receive this mark? And what is it going to do for the future self of me? What am I going to do in the future when I see this mark? Am I going to really remember where I'm from? Am I going to remember my ancestors, what we did? So I always say that whenever you receive markings like this, whether in the Filipino culture or whether in any culture you belong to that also has traditional tattooing, you need to go in there with an open mind, knowing that the practitioner who is doing this work for you will be the one to choose the markings, the symbols for you based on your story, based on your intention. That's what I do in my practice is we sit there, like you said with yours, we sit there and we talk story. Sometimes that takes longer than the actual tattooing itself, right? And we sit there and we talk about our background. We talk about where your family's from, and it really broke my heart when you said about your dad's side, right? How you are not able to really track as far out as your mother's side, and how a lot of our ancestors, they remain unknown to us. We don't know their names. We don't know what they did, right? So I always tell people, as much as possible, try to see how far back you can go in your genealogy, in your ancestry. So at least that way we have a sense of, okay, so here's where we're from. This is what my intention is, and this is how I can honor them. And so I always tell people, come into our space here with an open mind, knowing that we're going to really sit and talk story. We're going to talk story about your family, your background, as much as you know, and your intention. For me, the intention is everything, because I always say that the way that these marks are put on your body, the way that they look, that's always going to be something that is less of a priority than your intention. You know what I'm saying? Compared to Western tattooing with machines, where it is a lot more perfect, right? Those machines are built for perfection, really. Whereas with traditional tattooing, you may have maybe lines that are not 100% straight. They're not 100% filled in. They may be a little bit off center or skew or whatever. But the purpose of that is, what is the medicine that it brings to you? What are you receiving this for? Why are you receiving this? And what is it in your mind that sparked that journey of yours as to, let me receive these markings now? So, I always say that we need to come in with the right intention, because intention sets the tone for everything, for every mark in your body, especially since we're telling your family story, your ancestry on your skin. We're honoring them. And if you're coming in for reconnection with your ancestors, with healing, even you want to come in to be healed for something, you want to come in to strengthen your soul and to strengthen yourself, whatever your purpose is, remember that these markings will be a reflection of that. So I always say, whenever you come in to get these markings, just know that it's going to be done in a way that you might not even be used to. Like you had said, you come in there, you don't even know what you're receiving, but you're coming in with a heart knowing that it's my time to receive this. It's my time to pay homage to my ancestors, to my culture, to my lineage. This is something that I want to always reconnect with. So when I look back on my skin, I will remember who I am. I will remember why I'm here. I will remember them. I might not know their names. I might not know what they have done in their life, but regardless, they are still a part of my bloodline. They're still a part of me. They still live within me. And so I will honor them through these markings.
It was so, I love what you're saying there, because for me it was so literal in that moment, that experience I had. I brought so much more depth to my purpose. At a young age, I was fortunate enough to have some mentors and some experiences to help me sort of put my purpose out into the world. And it's changed slightly over the years with words, but the meaning has been the same. And it's to give my heart to God and be an influence for good and
Yeah.
catalyze transformation where I'm at. And that's been such a guiding compass to me. But when I had that experience in my office that I was telling you about, it brought a depth to my purpose that was so far beyond me, that it wasn't just about me, that it's not just about what I do today or what the future brings, but it's about what happened to get me here, right?
Yes.
And this long lineage that I come from. And it was so literal to me that I thought in that moment, what I already shared with you, I thought one day, and as a Christian, I believe this. As someone who has learned a lot from this indigenous culture, I believe the same thing. I actually believe that I will be able to see my ancestors one day, right?
Yes, for sure.
And and I literally thought that there's this dissonance in my family tree, that I have peoples that are so different from each other. I have Anglo colonizers, we'll say, and then islanders and people that were colonized and enslaved and you name it on the other side. And I felt I have a responsibility to bring people together. And I also literally felt that I want my ancestors to recognize something
Yes,
on me and in me.
for sure.
And I actually hope that this is with me,
Absolutely.
in the next life, because I want to show them that I see them
Yes,
and that I care about them and
yes.
that they're real to me, that they're so real to me.
Absolutely. And that's what I wanted to add on as well, is that in our belief, right, we carry these markings with us into the next life. We leave our physical bodies here when we pass away, when it is our time. And our tattoos continue to stay on us, on our soul. So, this is why this work is very much sacred work, because we are giving you these markings that will stay on you, guide you. And they even say in the mythology and the folklore that the tattoos will glow, they will illuminate in the journey towards the afterlife. And so that's why it is important to make sure you get these markings appropriately and correctly in order for your ancestors to say, hey, I know them. That's my family. That's my blood. And so it is such a big responsibility to be able to have these markings as well as to give them. But it is as much of a responsibility to have them because you have to live your life according to the marks that are given to you. If you're given marks that represent you as a warrior, represent you as a strong provider for your family, that represents just everything that encompasses who you are, then you need to live by the markings that are given to you. Like I said, if you are living a life completely opposite of the markings that are on your skin that represent strength and that represent working hard for your family, that represent everything that encompasses you, you are dishonoring those marks. You are dishonoring your ancestors. You're dishonoring the person that marked you. When we believe in someone and we say, hey, you are a warrior, you are a good provider for your family, you need to live by those marks. I have countless stories of people that have really flipped their life around because of these markings where, I've had a sample where a family would say, hey, my brother used to be this angry just person, and he had no connection with our family. We were very much disconnected. And then once he received these markings, suddenly something flipped. He lived by the markings that were given to him. He became closer to his family. He healed a part of himself that he didn't know could be healed. And this is the beauty of these markings, is that it is so sacred, and there's something that's within us that just flips once we receive these markings. And when you know that this is something that you will take with you for lifetimes to come, stays with your soul, then this is what differentiates this from other practices. Not, like I said, no shade on any other practice, but this is why this practice is so different in the truth that this is something that we will carry on for generations and lifetimes. And it is important to live by those marks. It is important to know that this is beyond just, like I mentioned to you before, this is beyond a transaction. This is beyond just, let me go in there and choose something that I want or choose something from the wall and I'll give you money and then boom, we're gone. We're done. No, this is a connection. You are having genuine human connection with your practitioner to the point to where after you're done, you essentially become family. Everyone that I've ever been honored to have tattooed in the work that I've been doing over the years, we have become family. We have become a chosen family. And I'm so thankful to have that, but that's the difference. And so it is beyond just a transaction. It is beyond just let me give you money and go. No, we are exchanging bits of our soul to each other. We're healing each other. We're listening to each other. We're being seen and we're being heard, and we're honoring our ancestors and in the space that we are tattooing, and our ancestors are there with us. My ancestors are there with us, protecting me and holding me and guiding me in the work. Your ancestors are in there with you, holding you and protecting you and guiding you through the pain and guiding you through the nerves and just saying, hey, I got you. I'm with you. Everything that I've ever done, that I've struggled with, it is here, and you are here because of that. And I'm here to protect you. And so this is what makes this different than just a transactional process. This is a spiritual process. This is a process where you exchange bits of yourself, and you will change from this. You will become somebody that you probably never knew was within you.
Yeah, transform. You will transform, and I hope that people listening can really pick up on and sense your sincerity and depth as you speak, because this is the point, and this is why I wanted to have you on the show. Was, when we can imagine, if, again, I'm not telling people to go and get tattoos. I'm saying if we can treat our purpose and our why in life the way that you talk about being marked, the way that I talk about it, if we treat our purpose with that much intentionality, that we want to live every day reminded by it, marked by it in our heart, that it changes how we think, how we behave, how we treat other people, how we set goals, how we orient our life, then we have lived a life marked by purpose, whether literal or not. And that's the message. That's the point of purpose and transformation. Is purpose isn't just a fun statement that gives you some direction. It's something that has to be deep within your bones,
Mhm.
that that no life circumstance or difficult situation you find yourself in is going to change it. And I love what you said about how you now have a responsibility. When you're marked like this, you have a responsibility to live up to what these markings
Mhm.
mean.
Mhm.
And what if we just had that on our heart? What if our purpose was that important to us and that we were that intentional about it that we had a responsibility every day to live in accordance to it? That's my message and my invitation to people is you don't need to go out and get a tattoo to be marked by something with depth, right?
Yes.
Now, it just so happens that, in our lineage, in our ancestry, that they did that. I love that. But for anybody, they can identify a purpose that helps them live a less transactional life
Yes.
and move beyond that and I call it into the space of transformation. Organizations can do that as well. I can't tell you how many organizations I've worked with where they have a purpose, but it's written in some handbook somewhere or somewhere on the wall, but nobody knows what it is. They don't
Mhm.
they don't make decisions based on it. They're not truly marked by it. It's just there.
Yeah.
And I have friends, it's kind of the contrast, and this again, no knock on modern tattooing and Western tattooing, 'cause it is beautiful and it's an art form
Yeah.
now, but I
100%.
have friends that are covered. I have a friend that's covered tattoos, arms, legs, everything, he loves it, and when I told him the story of this, he's like, "Man, now I feel so dumb because most of these are just stupid, they don't have any meaning at all, you know? Like, I just thought it would be fun to do this," and he's like, "I love the way that you talk about your tattoo because I can tell it's so much more than that to you."
Yeah.
And I would say the same thing can happen when we talk about purpose in our life. One purpose could be, well, this sounds fun, and this is a sexy way to say this is what our organization does, or this is what we stand for. And another way is, no, this is so important to me that I'm marked by it, and I will honor what this means in the decisions that I make. And a fun story when I was one of my I can't remember which session it was, but when he was doing the inside here,
Mhm.
you can see if I get close, kind of
Yes.
blurry,
Yes.
so it's hard, but these are ferns, right? And for those that don't know, a lot of indigenous tattooing is based on animals or land or things of that nature, but these are ferns and they weren't supposed to be ferns. He was gonna actually put the scorpion
I was
tail,
gonna say.
as you know, is like a symbol of warrior and strength, right? And he thought that that would resemble me well when I told him my story, but, every time we sat down and he would mark me, we would talk more story. And in that particular session, I was talking to him about more of my purpose and how I wanna help catalyze transformation and help people grow and help people become better. Mid-session, he literally changed it to the fern, which means
Yeah.
growth
Yes.
and
Yes.
posterity and becoming, and I love that story because, again, he made sure that he put something on me that I would now be responsible to, that I value more growth and becoming and bringing people together more than I do, the warrior spirit that's inside of me,
Yes.
and so I those memories and those things remind me every day when I see it, every day in the mirror,
Yeah.
I see this is what I stand for, and this is what I need to try to do. And now I fail often, as we all do, but
Yeah.
it's marked on me so I don't forget. And
Yeah.
and again, my invitation to people listening is mark something on your heart that you cannot forget and that helps you become the version of yourself that you're meant to become and that the people in your life need you to be, your family, your employees, your colleagues, your friends. They need you to be something because we're all connected, and mark yourself with a purpose that's gonna help you become that.
Absolutely. Mark yourself with purpose, mark yourself with intention, and mark yourself in a way that will transform your life and carry you to everything that you want to do in your life and for your descendants coming after you.
Well, we have about 5 or so minutes left, so I have a couple more questions for you. The last question is gonna be that you can start thinking about is, now that we've had this discussion, what would be your advice to anybody listening to live a life beneath the transaction, right? So that's the big question I will get to, but I'd love your thoughts on the book, and by the way, this is kind of fun. This is the first copy I have ever had, so
Love it.
you're the first
Congratulations.
you're the first to see it, anybody watching, I mean, I'm holding the copy in my hand now. Obviously, it doesn't you can pre-order it now on Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, Books A Million, but it won't arrive to your door till May 19th, so I have these early copies, which is fun to hold, but
Beautiful.
I sent you the manuscript.
Yes.
You read the
Yes, sir.
chapter on purpose.
I
What
did.
were some of your thoughts as you read that chapter?
I mean, it really it struck really close to home, especially, when you speak a lot about your Lola. It reminds me a lot of my Lola, my grandmother as well, the struggle that she has gone through and just how much of a warrior she is in her own right, right? So, but I really loved that chapter, and I really loved how you incorporated the practice of traditional tattooing in there as well. And really, whenever I talk to people, and as a nurse, as someone who also practices traditional tattooing, which in I always say in both forms, it's both healing in their own way, right? We got the literal sense of healing, we got the spiritual sense of healing, emotional healing. It's all well rounded, and so I tell everybody that I work with, whether it's my patients, whether it's the recipients that I tattoo, to always live your life with purpose and intention. And my thing is, especially with the tattoos that I do, you know, I can't tell you how many tears are shed in the studio, whether myself, whether the recipient, whether both of us together, because this is a moment of transformation. This is a moment where you are really saying yes to something inside of you that maybe for so long you were like, no, I'm not sure. I'm not ready. I don't know if I'm worthy enough. Right. But I always say that if you really want to live your life with purpose and you really want to live your life with intention, you have to constantly go forward in life knowing that, okay, everything that happened before me, everybody that came before me, whatever struggle they had gone through, because they all have their own stories, they all have their own journeys, but every single one of those journeys and every single one of those stories led to me today, right now, at this moment. I always say that live your life with intention and know that every action that you make, every decision you make, will decide the journey of all your descendants coming after you, right? And when you decide to come into the studio, my studio, or anybody, anybody that does this work, that practices this work as well, when you decide to go to them and say, listen, I want to honor everything that I am, I want to honor my ancestors, I want to also pave the way for the descendants coming after me, what you are doing is you're changing the timeline of a lot of people that, like I said, came before you. You're healing a lot of the generational trauma that our colonizers said tattoos are ugly, tattoos are evil, tattoos are, whatever, however they negated it. But you're healing that part of them by saying, hey, I'm going to reunite with the marks that have always been on my skin, that are always belonged to me. And at the same time, you are healing the generation coming after you by saying it is okay. It is okay to identify as who you are. It is okay to honor our culture by having these markings on your body because this is essentially who we are. And so, I always try to say and I tell people all the time, to live your life with purpose and make it something that is just beyond what a transaction is, which is let me just give you something and I get something back in return. Okay. And then we're done. No, you have to remember your purpose. You have to live by that purpose and at the same time, do something that will make your life and your soul worth it. Basically, I mean, I hope I'm stating that correctly, but this is what this practice has taught me beyond just getting tattoos and marking skin, but it has taught me that we as human beings are still capable of making that change, making that transformation, no matter what we've done in our life, no matter how things have gone for us, but we still are capable of change. We're still capable of healing that generational trauma that told us that we cannot be more or beyond who we are. We can always change and we can always change for the better and we can always make a change for the generations coming up so that way they don't experience what we've experienced, what they've experienced. And so my advice to people is to just live with intention, live with purpose, and at the same time know and be open-minded to the fact that you can and you will always be transforming. It never ends. It's a continuous cycle of transformation. And just receiving these markings is one chapter of your transformation, but it will definitely be a part where you will definitely evolve and change. And it will change you for the better. I can guarantee you that. Guarantee that it will change you for the better. And it will be something to be proud to wear, to honor your ancestors and to honor everything that you are. And I hope that more and more of us will be enlightened with this work. So that way we can always carry them and carry our ancestors proudly.
Yeah. I think you well answered the question too of how can we live beneath the transaction, and through what you said of living with purpose, being intentional, all of that. You answered it so well. I would say, as we close, my invitation to listeners right now is, a journey of transformation begins with purpose, and it begins with being marked by purpose. I'm not saying go get a tattoo, right? For some of you, if that's what you want to do, great. But what I am saying is live marked by purpose on your heart. And if you had to wear that on your sleeve, what would it say? What would the marking be that would help you remember that you're a link in a long line before, and you're going to be a link in those that come after. Western ideology is very individualistic, and it's very much, the predominant way of thinking is, do what's best for you, take care of yourself, don't think about the past, move on forward today, things of that nature, sayings that help, that all point to people just taking care of themselves and doing what they think is best for them and who they are in the moment at that time.
Hmm.
And I've just never been a fan of that way of thinking, because we aren't who we are out of nowhere. We came from somewhere, and we came from something and someone and a people, and we're going to become something, and there's going to be people that come after us, whether or not we have kids or not. There's going to be people that we influence after us. So we have an opportunity in the moment to bridge those before and those after, and we have a responsibility to them. Whether or not our past was full of pain and trauma or not, that still makes up who we are.
Yes.
And we have an opportunity to, like you said, to transform and become better and better every day. And that, that expanse of that thinking is so much deeper when we honor the past,
Yeah.
and we honor the pamana, the lineage and the legacy that we're come from. And I think that there's so much utility in our individual lives and our organizations and our communities if we think about, we came from something, so let's become something together now.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And that's my hope anybody listening to this. That's my hope from people that read the book. It's not, necessarily, it has nothing to do with going and getting a tattoo. It has everything to do with the metaphor of living a life marked by purpose. And
Yes.
that's my invitation to people listening. And I'm so grateful that you could join us, Kiko, and offer your insight and your expertise and your perspective. I think it's incredibly valuable. And I hope that people that listened, there's so much you can pull from this, but at the very least,
Absolutely.
I hope they pull what you just ended with. We live a life beneath the transaction when we
Yes.
live with purpose and intention in everything that we
100%.
do. And that's beautiful. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for
Appreciate it.
having me, brother. Such an honor.
Yeah. And thanks for everybody that tuned in. And until next time, be safe and take care.